Apple Blitz with Anthony Rivardo and Matt O'Leary.
Hello and welcome into another episode of Big Apple Blitz. Matt O'Leary, Anthony Rivardo hanging out with you on this lovely Thursday. Anthony, how's it going, my friend?
It's going well. You know, we're finally here past the midweek point. We had a pretty difficult week one. Both of our teams did, especially the Giants. I got to say that was ugly on Sunday. Obviously, we recapped a little bit of that on Monday. I'm excited to go ahead and recap this Jets 49ers game as well. And then wipe the slate clean, look ahead to week two, and hope to see something better in the future.
Absolutely. We will get into all that with both of our teams. We left off Monday night previewing the New York Jets going up against the San Francisco 49ers. And I'm not surprised that the Jets lost the game. I just found it a little bit surprising in the manner in which it happened, where no Christian McCaffrey, and we got Jordan Mason running wild on the New York Jets defense. They allowed 180 rushing yards on the ground. Just a really tough performance, I thought, from this defense in week one, and left a sour taste in my mouth.
Yeah, I mean, it was disappointing. The Jets kind of fell flat, but I think there were a lot of positive takeaways as well. Like, you weren't thrilled necessarily with the outcome of the game, nor the entire performance. Obviously, the defense, you left a lot to be desired, especially against the run. But I do think offensively, there were some positive takeaways. It wasn't Breece Hall's best performance, like, that's for sure. And we expect a lot better from him. We were talking about going into that game, we thought that he was going to have a huge performance. That didn't come to fruition, but he did have some good moments, and it is only week one, and I do expect him to improve. And the biggest takeaway that I had that's positive for the Jets, Aaron Rodgers could still throw the football. He could still throw it with a lot of zip and a lot of accuracy, and he's still savvy at the line of scrimmage. There was obviously the free play that he converted into a touchdown that was vintage Aaron Rodgers. These are things that you could take away from this game and feel positive about going forward. But again, there were some moments where you said, okay, that didn't meet my expectations. How can the Jets improve here? How can they be better? So there was just a lot to unpack in that week one matchup.
Yeah, it is a lot to unpack here. Wanted to pull up the box score as you were talking about it and look at Aaron Rodgers' numbers. They didn't ask him to do a lot. 13 of 21. The Jets also just did not have the ball. It was two-thirds of the time of possession was to the San Francisco 49ers, as displayed by their 400 yards of offense. It was, again, a really tough showing for the Jets defense in this one against San Francisco. But I think there's a little bit of a misconception going around by some, not all, but that Aaron Rodgers wasn't good in this game because they look at the box score and go, oh, he threw for 167 yards and he had a pick in the game. There's no way that he could have played well. I don't agree with that. I'm not saying that he, like, oh, based off that performance, he's winning the MVP, but there are a few throws in this game that, like, just put my nerves at rest a little bit. A throw up the left sideline to Allen Lazard, and then, as you mentioned, the free play that he hits Lazard for the touchdown. There was like a third down fade to Garrett Wilson early on in the game. That was just a really nice throw. And I liked how decisive he felt, and he was getting the ball out a lot quicker. He was only pressured twice in this game. I thought from a passing perspective, they actually did okay.
I thought so too. I mean, you highlighted that throw up the left sideline. I thought was really nice. And again, there were just a few passes where I was like, okay, that looked vintage. That looked like Aaron Rodgers from a few seasons ago. And it's been a long time since he's played football again. It's been over a year. He had those 4 snaps last year. I'm not counting that. So you got to date back even further to find the last time that Aaron Rodgers fully suited up and played in an NFL game. And considering how long it's been, he looked very good to me. He only threw 21 passes. The Jets didn't have the ball a whole ton. They need to find a way to keep the ball clean and obviously create more opportunities for Rodgers. But I thought that he had some opportunities in this game to make the most of, and he did. And he had some moments where his throws were brilliant, and they reminded you what made him so great and reminded you why you feel so confident about this team going into the season. So, again, not the week one performance that you wanted. It wasn't everything that you desired from Aaron Rodgers, but there were a lot of signs for positivity. And I think Rodgers was actually one of those most positive outcomes from the game that you could take away and feel good about going forward.
Yeah, it's same for me with the offensive line and pass protection. I mentioned that Aaron Rodgers was only pressured 2 times in this game. There was Tyron Smith had a holding penalty against Nick Bosa, but it wasn't like, the 49ers defensive line, wrecked the game in a or in a pass game perspective. It wasn't really the case. Not establishing the run game to me came as the surprise, because I think a lot of people look at this line on paper, and you see Morgan Moses and Elijah Vera Tucker and Joe Tippmann and even John Simpson. Like, those guys project as better run blockers and doing more damage in the run game than they do in pass protection. But they got pushed around on both sides of the line of scrimmage. Defensive line had maybe the worst game they've ever had under Robert Saleh. I thought they got zero pressure on the quarterback as well, but more importantly, just zero push in the run game. And I don't want to take anything away from the 49ers. They're obviously an incredible football team. They've been in the NFC Championship game 4 straight seasons. And Kyle Shanahan is one of the best play callers in the NFL, has a great scheme, always seems to have his running backs, no matter who it is. It could be a UDFA like Jordan Mason, being able to be productive. But at the same time, for a defense that's supposed to be one of the best in the NFL, that was disappointing too.
No, absolutely. That was, to me, the most disappointing aspect of this game for the Jets. Like, you expected so much more from that run defense, and no Christian McCaffrey. Felt like, okay, the Jets have an opportunity here to not get gashed in the running game. You got a backup running back coming in, an unknown in Jordan Morgan. You expect to shut him down. You expect this Jets defense to live up to the hype, and they failed to meet those expectations. And it was almost embarrassing, considering it's prime time. Again, an unknown running back running all over your defense. That's what you hate to see. That's like the last thing that you want to see. So, but I don't think that's going to be a trend. I don't think that's something to be worried about going forward. I think this is week 1. Sometimes things are really sloppy in week 1, and it kind of dates back to what I said to you in a text, Matt. I think this team just needed to play more in the preseason. I made that argument a ton for the New York Giants. I think it's fair to make it for the Jets as well. And a lot of these teams around the league, the Bengals even, you can look around the league, these teams that don't play their starters much in preseason, they get off to these slow starts in the regular season. The first few weeks of the regular season become their preseason, and then they put themselves in holes. And I know that the Jets were the underdogs in this game anyway. The 49ers are one of the best teams in football. I get all that, but still, this team looked rusty. It looked sluggish. And I think this is a great defense on paper, and I think they needed more reps so that they could have hit the ground running in week 1. They didn't get those reps, and I think that's where a lot of the sloppiness came from.
Yeah, it's a good point. From the Jets side, they were looking at the joint practices as well as just running more plays. I believe the number was 300. They ran, the first team offense and defense ran against each other 300 more times in training camp this year than they did a year ago, which is a really big difference, but hard to replicate in game situations. And I think that's a talking point that's going to get brought up, especially when you don't play in the preseason and you come out and it looks like there's rust. At times on both sides of the ball, but specifically with that defense, it was a very uncharacteristic performance from them. And I think we have to find the balance of, this was frustrating and it wasn't an acceptable performance, but also at the same time, it is week 1. We saw the Bengals get upset by the Patriots in week 1. They start slow every year. Week 1 lies to us sometimes. Like, the Saints put up 40 points. I don't think they're going to be an offense that's putting up 40 points every single week. So for me, it's about finding the balance of, hey, it's week 1, we're going to be okay, and also the things that concerned us. I think you have some people who are like all the way in on, it's only week 1, and are like too passive on it. And then you also have some who are like, the sky is falling. This team is so much worse than we thought. When in reality, it probably falls somewhere in the middle.
You're right. I mean, for the Giants, I think the sky is falling, and it is so much worse than we thought. But for the Jets, I do agree with you. There were some confusing moments in this game, though, and I do want to get your take on what happened with Sauce Gardner, because maybe you can give me more info, obviously being that you cover the Jets far more than I do and follow them far more than I do. What happened there? Why was he on the bench for those reps? What's going on?
Yeah, so somewhere there was conspiracy theory going around that he was benched for his poor tackling, but that wasn't the case. Both Saleh and Sauce Gardner said after the game that he was trying to catch his breath. So I don't know if he was slow to get up on one of the tackles on a third down drive. So I don't know if he got the wind knocked out of him, or to your point from earlier, if it was just poor conditioning from not being in game shape yet and them not playing in preseason games. But he missed 9 plays, and on the majority of that drive, that's when Brock Purdy did his most damage. I think he was 6 for 6 on that drive. But when Sauce was in the game, he run game aside, in the passing game, he was only targeted twice, no receptions allowed. Typical Sauce Gardner in pass coverage, but that was very bizarre. It felt like we were getting no info on it, and then after the game, it was like, oh, he's he was trying to catch his breath and get back in there. So it's still a little bit of a mystery, but I don't think it was any sort of punishment.
Yeah, it just felt so strange because I remember during the game, there was a report that said it's not injury related and he's completely fine. So I guess being out of breath is not injury related, but almost in a way, maybe it is. So I don't know. A very weird and confusing moment there. And you're right. That's when Brock Purdy did a lot of his damage. And to the 49ers credit, I thought a lot of their receivers and their passing game in general just looked a little bit out of sync. Week 1 kind of sloppiness, but they still move the ball well and they look really good. I'm scared about the 49ers this year. I think that they're going to be everything that we expected them to be. And then for the Jets, I have high expectations for this team. I still do, despite this loss. And I think that, you make a good point in the pass protection on the offensive line looked improved, and there were a lot of good signs on that end. Now, what do you think the Jets can do to get Breece Hall going a little bit more? Because, again, week 1, he had some good moments. He scored a touchdown, had a fumble as well. Wasn't his best game, a little bit sloppy. How do they get him going in week 2?
Yeah, I think, honestly, a big thing is going to have to be the improved offensive line play. Next Gen Stats had a stat that Breece Hall had negative 10 yards per carry. No, not per carry, excuse me. Negative 10 yards before contact was the stat. So it was showing that he was getting hit in the backfield quite often. So I think it's about the offensive line gelling together a little bit more in the run game. I think it's going to come with reps. And again, that's an outlier performance from Breece Hall. Same thing. A lot of people on the defensive side are really down on how Jermaine Johnson played, and he didn't play well. Like, it's not me defending him, but I just think we've seen way too much positive tape and good tape from both Breece Hall and Jermaine Johnson to be down on them. But I think it's again, repetition. I think the offensive line, they didn't play together in a game. They spent a lot of time in training camp together, which is good. Obviously, it showed that the pass protection was working, but I think it's just, we need Elijah Vera Tucker to look like AVT in the run game, and Morgan Moses, same thing. I thought both those guys really struggled on Monday night.
No doubt. I think that's going to take time. And again, maybe you can relate that to the preseason. I really think that's just, it always takes time for offensive lines to gel together, and we're just going to have to see where it goes from here.
Yeah, I wanted to toss a couple comments up. First State Jets kind of said something similar. Very surprising we couldn't get anything going on the ground with the line and Breece. That was honestly one of Breece's worst performances. I know he got in the end zone, but he would be the first one to admit that too. I know he actually apologized to Aaron Rodgers for his play. Only averaged 3.4 yards per carry. Had the fumble. I don't. Like, that's not what I expect from him going forward. Again, I think we just saw way too much positive from him over the years to be down on it. But, Tennessee coming up this week, we'll get more into the preview later on in the show, but it's not like they're going up against the slouch defense this week. So they'll have their work cut out for them as well.
No doubt. It's going to be a really crucial week 2, I think, for both of these teams.
Just a couple more things in the comments before we preview the Giants. I wanted to see if you agree with this take from Tony, the GM. Jets only use 3 offensive players, Garrett Wilson, Hall, and Lazard, because of the lack of continuity. Do you chalk that up to being lack of continuity? Is it play calling? What do you think went into that?
Well, I can tell you I wasn't thrilled about the play calling. My biggest concern for this offense going into the season was Nathaniel Hackett, and I think that feels justified after week 1. I think it's a mix of both, lack of continuity, play calling. I think it's a mix of everything, but the play calling really stands out to me as being a reason for concern. Again, it's a reason that I was concerned going into the season, still concerned after week 1. I thought there were some really questionable play calls. And there's only so much that Aaron Rodgers can do. Like we talked about that a couple weeks ago, how he's got the ability and the autonomy to make changes at the line of scrimmage, and it's really going to be Rodgers' offense for sure. That's true, but there are still limitations to that, what a quarterback can do at the line of scrimmage and in the huddle. And there were definitely times that this offense felt held back by Nathaniel Hackett. I will say, though, Tyrod Taylor looked good. I really wish the Giants re-signed him. After seeing what I saw in week 1 from Daniel Jones and then seeing what I saw in week 1 from Tyrod Taylor, my God, I'm really upset that he's on the Jets instead of the Giants.
Yeah, I don't want to rub it in or anything. It's just if he was starting for the Giants against Minnesota, that game is a hell of a lot closer than what it was with Daniel Jones. Frustrating, man. I'm sorry. Want to get into your Giants now? Maybe a good transition to talk about Giants and going up against Washington.
Yeah, if we must. I mean, listen, this is a game that I hate to say it. It's week 2, and I'm not trying to be hyperbolic. Is it fair to say this is a must-win game for the New York Giants? Because I feel like it is.
No, it definitely is. Like that sounds so dramatic in week 2, but Daniel Jones, like one of the rare teams that he just absolutely dominates. Like I saw, actually, we might as well pull it up. You had a stat on it, but I think it's worthwhile to share here. Daniel Jones's numbers is 5-1-1 against the Washington Commanders, 10 touchdowns, 3 interceptions, averaging 215.7 passing yards per game. Like if there was ever a week, as you said, for him to bounce back, it feels like it's this one.
Yeah, and not just him. If you look at Kayvon Thibodeau's career stats against Washington, I think I tweeted that as well yesterday. Both of these players who wildly underperformed in week 1, well, they've got their perfect matchups in week 2. And so this feels like the week that there just can't be any excuses. I don't think there were any excuses for what happened in week 1, but some fans made excuses. They tried to argue, Daniel Jones hadn't played football in a long time. Kayvon's still getting warmed up, blah, blah, blah. Don't want to hear any of that BS. But in week 2, against the team that these two players and a lot of these players have a lot of success against, they need to have success in this game. But I'm going to tell you, I'm concerned for this game, and I'm not confident that Daniel Jones has this bounce back because this is not the Washington teams of years past, right? Same thing that I said for that Vikings game, Matt. If you remember, I pretty much argued this is not that 2022 Vikings team that Daniel Jones beat up on. This is now a Brian Flores-led defense with the Minnesota Vikings. Same argument here for Washington. This is now a Dan Quinn-led Washington team that has a great defensive mind at the helm. Listen, Ron Rivera at one point was a great mind. He clearly got washed up, and that's why the Commanders became a very bad team in recent years. Dan Quinn, I don't think is necessarily the greatest head coach in the league, but he was arguably the best defensive coordinator in football over the past couple seasons. Everything that he did with the Dallas Cowboys, he basically turned water to gold. This week, you have the same matchup for Daniel Jones. You have a team that he's supposed to play well against, and you have a very experienced, smart defensive coordinator / head coach here. Same thing with Flores. Now it's Dan Quinn. I am afraid that this is another one of those traps being set out for Daniel Jones. He's going to walk up to the line of scrimmage. He's going to see, oh, this is cover 0. I'm going to throw this thing to this part of the field, and it's going to be a big gain. Oh, this guy's coverage. I fell for it once again like I did all week last week. Boom, the Commanders tricked me, interception. Like, that's how I think this game is going to go, very similarly to last week. I hope that I'm wrong, and listen, the Commanders' defense is not very good. They have holes all over their secondary. If there was ever a week that Malik Neighbors should go for 150 yards and 3 touchdowns, this is that week. But do I trust Daniel Jones to put the ball in position for him to make those plays against this defense led by Quinn? That's the question mark that I need an answer to, and unfortunately, that's why I don't feel super confident going into week 2.
Yeah, I can't say that I blame you. Like the corner room in Washington, they really struggled in that joint practice against the Jets, and the Jets, the second and third string offense was beating up on them a little bit. But can the Giants do it this week? Again, you would hope so based on the past history. But as you rightfully pointed out, past history, like this isn't that same Washington team. And I know they ended up not playing very well against Tampa Bay, at least defensively, but I kind of liked what I saw from Jayden Daniels in this game. And I'm not really convinced that the Giants are going to be able to stop him when he uses his legs and moves around in the pocket, especially after the performance they put out on tape in week 1 against Sam Darnold and the Vikings. So like, not only is it from the Giants on the offensive side where you're questioning, like, is this the week that they bounce back against, Deron Payne and Jonathan Allen and that interior of the defensive line that's so strong, but also at the same time, like, if Jaden Daniels starts running around like he did a week ago, are they going to be able to contain him?
And not only that, I think that Washington kind of struggled to get their passing game going last week. Jaden Daniels, not necessarily his fault. I felt like the playmakers didn't do him a lot of favors. Terry McLaurin was absent for the majority of that game. And I think that this is the week where he probably wants to air it out. They want to turn him loose and see what he can do against this Giants defense that has just not played well. It didn't play well much last year, didn't play well in week 1. They let Sam Darnold carve them apart. I do think that you can see potential here for Jaden Daniels to have that breakout week 2 performance where he runs a whole bunch against this Giants defense. He throws a few deep passes, airs it out. And that's something that I'm going to be curious to see. Brian Daboll in Hard Knocks was basically begging for Jaden Daniels. He wanted to trade up for him so badly. He really wanted to see him become a New York Giant. Instead, he becomes a Washington Commander. The Giants failed to trade up for Drake May. Now the Giants are stuck with Daniel Jones. If Daniel Jones can't put up a decent performance here and gets, let's say, significantly outplayed by Jaden Daniels, is that enough to like light a fire in Brian Daboll, piss him off and say, okay, screw this, you're benched. Like, I'm done with Daniel Jones. This hurt too badly seeing Jaden Daniels do this to my team. Now it's time to move on and get Drew Lock in the game.
I see it from the coach's side of things, but correct me if you think or if you feel differently on it, but I almost feel like there's got to be pressure from Joe Shane coming down on him, being like, hey, like, we pay this guy all this money. We got to figure out a way for it to work with Daniel Jones. Do you view it that way? Or do you think like Shane would be like, yeah, man, like, obviously this isn't working. Do what you got to do and bench him?
I think that the Giants, personally, I think they're looking for an excuse to get Daniel Jones off the field. I think a lot of what happened in week 1, there's no reason why he should have thrown 42 passes. Like, let's be so for real. That was ridiculous. The fact that he was playing through the 4th quarter, it almost felt in some ways, and I've seen a lot of Giants fans say this on social media, felt like Brian Daboll was trying to show management and show ownership that he's not the right quarterback. He was like, let's put him out there basically to die, expose how bad he is, so that way when I make this change at quarterback, I don't get a ton of blowback. I get praise for doing so. And I think that's where we're headed. I think we're going to get another game versus Dan Quinn where it's a good defense, a smart defensive coordinator. Daniel Jones probably struggles, and that's all she wrote. Because like you said earlier, this is that game where Jones always beats Washington, it feels like. He always plays well against them. So now what happens in week 2 after coming off of this atrocious performance in week 1? He goes into week 2 against Washington and plays poorly once again. Well, then I think that's kind of the end of the road for Daniel Jones, who, need I remind everybody, has an injury clause in his contract. He ran into 4 sacks last week. He was pressured 11 times. He pressured himself 7 times, according to PFF. He sacked himself 4 times and was only surrendered a sack from the offensive line once. So he is running into contact. He is getting himself hit repeatedly throughout these games, running into sacks. You can't afford to allow him to do that with that injury clause in his contract. So again, I think he either has to have a vintage Daniel Jones versus Washington performance in week 2, or it's time for Mr. Drew Lock to take over.
Also, looking at the Giants' upcoming schedule too, I just wanted to pull that up. If they don't, oh shit, I did the wrong thing. I stopped the screen share. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to change tabs. Come on now. All right. If the win doesn't come against Washington, you got to go on the road to Cleveland. We know Deshaun Watson stinks and is a bad human being, but that defense is really, really good. Dallas, they've struggled against. On the road in Seattle is always a tough place to play. Cincinnati, the Eagles, Pittsburgh has a great defense. Like, where's this win coming from?
That's so my running joke that I have with Alex that I haven't said on the air because I don't want to get a ton of blowback from Fireside Giants fans, but my running joke here is the Giants don't pick up their first win until week 8 when they finally sub in Tommy DeVito for primetime football, and he does it once again.
Okay. I like that.
Because, I mean, you look at the schedule, I also wonder, where does this win come from? When do they finally win a game? By week 8, Pittsburgh's not great. Their offense is not good. I don't think they're necessarily going to turn things around by then either. I think they're going to have their struggles. And sometimes it just takes putting in a quarterback on prime time to kind of have a little bit of a spark plug performance like we saw with that Tommy DeVito Linsanity run last year. I think by week 8, it just might happen. And that's when we finally start to win some games. And then the schedule really lightens up. They can go on a win streak if they win against Pittsburgh in week 8. They have the Panthers shortly thereafter. They have the Commanders again. That's right. Then they have a bye week, and they come out of the bye week against Tampa Bay. Let's see how they're feeling coming out of the bye against Dallas and New Orleans. Like, they actually can go on a little bit of a late season run. The Falcons in week 16 and Colts in week 17 should be beatable for this team if they start to live up to their potential and turn things around by then. So again, I think Daniel Jones probably survives another few weeks somehow, some way. Maybe we get some Drew Lock, but dude, don't be shocked if by week 8 we're talking Tommy Cutlets the rest of the way and he's picking up some wins for this team and totally ruining our draft position and chances of drafting a quarterback.
You said it, not me. I was gonna say, I don't know, man. Do we want to live through this again, where Giants are gonna pick like 8th in the draft instead of top 3?
Listen, I always root for my team to win no matter what. I'm a true Giants fan. I don't want to root for losses. It'll pain me knowing that those wins are making it more difficult for us to draft a quarterback, but I'm also not going to say no to another vintage Tommy DeVito run. Like, sign me up, man. Come on. That's Big Apple Blitz's QB1. I am here for all of the Tommy Cutlets. If he ends up going on this run, I'll be there fully supporting him through it.
I love it. Good comment here from Rico the Pup. Quinn said they'll run the ball more, doesn't want Daniels running as much. Do you guys buy that? Because I don't. Yeah, let's cap our quarterback's best skill set currently, he says. Yeah, I thought Daniels ran a little bit reckless in that game. Like his helmet popped off like 2 or 3 times when he was running. So maybe just kind of wants to reel him in a little bit. But yeah, that does feel like you're kneecapping your quarterback strength. Like, why are you drafting Jaden Daniels if you don't want him running around?
I mean, I think he's going to air it out this week. So okay. I don't necessarily think that he is going to run it more. I think what they want to do, listen, we know what Jaden Daniels' top strengths were at LSU, his ability to run the ball and his ability to hit deep shots. I think the Giants let up a couple of those last week against Sam Darnold. Obviously, there were some excellent playmakers out there. You can talk about Addison. Obviously, Justin Jefferson connected on like a 45-yard reception from Darnold. I think what the Commanders are going to want to do this week is not just have Jaden Daniels be an extension of the running game. I think they want him to lead a high-flying passing attack this week against a Giants defense that is very vulnerable right now and not getting enough pass rush home. So if the pass rush isn't getting home, I actually think we see Jaden Daniels take that next step as a passer in week 2 as he kind of collects different elements of his game week by week and mold himself into a more complete player by the end of the season. That's kind of what you want to see from rookie quarterbacks. So I don't necessarily think they're going to cap him. I don't necessarily think that, they're going to slow him down from running. When he has his opportunities, he's going to take them. But they do have 2 very good running backs in their backfield. They don't need to rely on Jaden Daniels to do the heavy lifting in their rushing attack. And I think that instead they're going to want to see him throw the ball more downfield.
There we go. I like that. So are you ready to drop your final score prediction and any final thoughts on this game against Washington?
I don't know if I'm ready to do my final score predictions, but I will. I think that this is going to be a 20-17 loss for the New York Giants. They actually do find the end zone. They get in there a couple of times. I think Malik Neighbors finally scores. I think that's the only touchdown that Daniel Jones throws, though. I think it's only one from Jones, and the other one comes from Devin Singletary, who, might I add, did look pretty good last week. Just didn't get the ball a whole ton because the Giants were playing from behind, but I liked what Singletary put on the field. So I think he and Neighbors get on the board, but ultimately, I think this defense is going to be very vulnerable against this Washington rushing attack. They're going to control a lot of this game, and they're going to end up winning it, I think, by a final score of 20-17.
Not crazy far off from where I'm going to go. I think I'm going 20-13. So low scoring game. I have the Giants getting in the end zone one time in this game. I agree that it'll be Malik Neighbors who gets in, and then a couple field goals. I think for the Giants, they're going to struggle. I've mentioned it already, but I think Daniels with his legs is what gets them. I know you're big on the passing attack, and I guess maybe with what the Giants showed in week 1 with their secondary, maybe that's where we should be leaning as well. Just did not look did not look pretty. So I'm going to say 20-13. Before we get back to the Jets, our guy in here, Tony the GM, he loves his quarterbacks. He's saying that there's only one quarterback in this draft. I believe he says the Penn State quarterback, right? That's Alar is the Penn State
Drew
quarterback.
Alar.
Yeah.
Yeah, Drew Alar is not necessarily my cup of tea just yet. Maybe I'll come around to him by the time the draft process rolls around. That happens with me sometimes. Sometimes I get cold on quarterbacks. Sometimes I get warm on them. I got very warm on J.J. McCarthy in about the final month or two leading up to the draft. But right now for me, it's Cam Ward, because I think that I even mentioned Cam Ward's name on this show during the pre-draft process as a late round pick that I was really excited about going into the 2024 NFL draft. I think I mentioned it here because I was very high on him coming out of Washington State. He ends up going back to school, transfers to Miami. Then I mentioned, all right, now I'm concerned. I don't think Miami is necessarily the best place for him to develop his skills. Well, oh my God, does he look like an NFL quarterback through 2 weeks of college football? I think he's going to shoot his way up the draft boards, become a first-round pick, and maybe even a top 5 pick, similarly to how Jaden Daniels had that meteoric rise in 2023. So that's the name that I'm keeping an eye on. Drew Alar, maybe for you, Tony, to GM, but for me, the one QB is Cam Ward. He was the guy that I thought was going to be a mid-round absolute steal and an eventual starter in this year's draft. Goes back. Now I think he's going to be a day one starter in the NFL in 2025.
Quinn Ewers, hook him, baby. QB1.
Hey, there is always the outside chance that the Giants win a couple of those games down the stretch this year, roll it back, year 7 leap, inbound. It all comes crashing down in 2025, 2026. Manning under center, Manning under center, Manning under center, baby.
We're gonna get. You can't go through. We can't do this show next year with year 7 Daniel Jones. I don't think your mustache and hair is gonna be gray.
I won't be around for it. I don't think I'll last.
No, I don't think either of us will. All right, let's get back to it and get into the preview for the Jets Tennessee Titans. Jets 3.5-point favorites on the road. That's rare. A rare favorite for the Jets on the road, but Tennessee lost a tough one in week 1. I'll tell you one thing that scares me a little bit in this game, not going to lie, is Tony Pollard and that rushing attack looked really good against the Chicago Bears. They ran for, I believe it was 130 or 140 rush yards as a team, averaged over 5 yards a carry. We know the Jets defense just struggled against the run. So should I be concerned about that going into this one?
I think that there is reason for concern. They had 140 total rushing yards as a team. I'm very surprised to see Tyjae Spears only got 4 carries, but I guess that happens when Tony Pollard's averaging 5 yards a pop. Will Levis also put up 36 rushing yards on 4 attempts, so that's not bad itself. But while I think there is some reason to be concerned about that, this Titans team isn't beating anybody until Will Levis starts throwing the ball more accurately and stops making decisions like he made against the Chicago Bears to throw up that awful pick 6 and lose the game. That was one of his 2 interceptions. He had a 52.5 rating, 19 of 32 passing for 127 yards. I mean, when you average 4 yards per completion, you're not going to win any games as an NFL quarterback, unless, of course, you're Caleb Williams, who averaged 3.2 somehow. So it's even worse. But this Titans team, listen, I think it's one of the worst teams in football. I'm going to be completely honest with you. I think this is a bounce back, get right game for the New York Jets. I'm not overly concerned about this rushing attack. And I think that it was a week 1 blip against the 49ers because, listen, that wasn't Jordan Morgan running all over the New York Jets defense. That was Kyle Shanahan doing what Kyle Shanahan does best, and that's scheming together the best rushing attack in football. He's the best at it, and you won't change my mind. I'm a Kyle Shanahan truther. So that's what I think happened in week 1. And in week 2, this is the get-right game for the Jets. I think that they bottle up a mediocre, truly, Tennessee Titans offense and rushing attack.
Yeah, their offensive line really isn't all that good outside of the left side. They drafted Skoronski, who's playing left guard, a couple years ago, and this past year was J.C. Latham, who they plugged in at left tackle. But some issues there on the right side of the line. It clearly worked in week 1 against Chicago, but I love the point you brought up about Will Levis and his turnovers. He has, in 10 career starts, 6 interceptions and 8 fumbles. So he's going to give you ball. He's going to give you the ball and give you extra possessions, which is something that the 49ers won't do. Brock Purdy doesn't turn it over very often. They're a very sound quality football team. The Shanahan rushing style is one of a kind, truly. He's just on a level of his own. So I do think the Jets defense gets right in this game. And I also think that the big thing that is a positive for me, even with them running the ball well last week, Tennessee, that is, against Chicago, I just think they're going to really adjust and put 8 guys in the box and say, okay, Will Levis beat us deep over the top. And I don't have any faith that he does.
I don't have any faith in that either. Again, this feels like classic get right game. I mean, you look at this Tennessee Titans offense, and I'm just kind of trying to look at some of their stats here. And even in the receiving game, Calvin Ridley, Tyler Boyd being their 2 receivers that led the team. DeAndre Hopkins, I think, is just well past his prime at this point. I don't think that Will Levis has the weapons necessary to correct the mistakes that he makes. And because of that, I think he's one of those classic strong arm quarterbacks. I don't have anybody open. I'm going to make it happen. And he just doesn't have that kind of talent just yet. He hasn't developed into that. And that's why he makes all of these mistakes. Tries to play hero ball in a way that doesn't usually work out for first and second year quarterbacks. And I think, again, against a Jets defense that's going to be eager to bounce back after a lackluster week 1 performance, but still has a ton of talent at all 3 levels of the defense. Yeah, to me, this is the week where Will Levis just compounds. I think that it gets worse for him, actually. He had the fumble loss, he had 2 interceptions, and now he's going up against an even better defense. And I think that his issues might get kind of compounded here just based on the lack of talent surrounding him. So like you said, not the best offensive line. Yeah, the rushing attack might give you some fears, but at the end of the day, I just really like the way that this poor Titans offense matches up with a, on paper, very good Jets defense.
Yeah, Peter S says Will McDonald strip sack incoming. He was very MIA against the San Francisco 49ers, but honestly, I would not be surprised if something like that happened in this game. He at Iowa State was a strip sack artist. He had actually, of the edge rushers pass rushing, not that he did it often, because I think they only pressured Brock Purdy on 3 times on 31 dropbacks, which is just not very good. But anyway, moral of the story, that wouldn't shock me at all, especially with a young quarterback who could have, be prone to holding onto the football for too long. If he gets loose and starts screaming around the edge, that would not shock me in the least if they strip sacked him, specifically Will McDonald with his speed on the edge.
Yeah, no doubt. I do think that brings up a good question for me to ask you, though. A lot of Jets fans said Hassan Reddick was a luxury. I've been reading a lot about this. I don't think he was a luxury. I think that he was a necessity. I assume he's not playing this week either. How are you feeling about this? Like what's going on? How do the Jets kind of course correct here and get their pass rush back on track?
Yeah, I felt a little vindicated, honestly, from this week 1 performance. I'm not going to lie, because something that I talked a lot about that I got a lot of pushback on was that the Jets actually needed Hassan Reddick, and that trading away John Franklin Myers for a couple nickels was a terrible idea and really poor roster management. And the Jets get gashed in the run game. Michael Clemens, whose strength is supposed to be as a run defender, looked horrible. So not passing his first test as the JFM replacement. But then for Hassan Reddick, I understand that they weren't in 3rd and long a lot in this game and they couldn't pin their ears back and go. But Jermaine Johnson, Will McDonald, Michael Clemens, Takk McKinley, none of them were getting home. So yeah, when you have someone who in his sleep is giving you 10 plus sacks, I think he would have helped in that game. The run defense was definitely the bigger issue, but Hassan Reddick being out there also helps the run defense because it takes Michael Clemens off the field, who was horrible in this game. So I think it's an issue. I would like the Jets to get Hassan Reddick back out there ASAP. This feels like it has no end in sight. I don't know what's going to happen here.
Neither do I. And I'm very confused how we've gotten to this point. I'm very confused what the resolution will be. Again, like you said, no end in sight. It's tough to kind of project how this gets resolved. But I do have another question for you, and this is one that's very personal to me. I need an answer because of my Dynasty League. Where was Malachi Corley? Do I expect to see him on the field soon? Do I expect to make him or see him become an impactful player for this team anytime soon? Please, oh my God, please, can he start to get some snaps?
I would really hope so. He had one snap in this game. Mike Williams had 9. Robert Saleh said today, or not today, excuse me, yesterday, that he'd like to get those guys more involved. I'm going to say it's going to probably be like a month is going to be my guess. We're going to see about another month of Allen Lazard before we get in some Malachi Corley. So I would hope you don't have to be in a spot where he is playing for you this week.
I would also hope that. But I think that I'm one injury away from this dynasty team collapsing is how I feel. And
Okay.
I need to know Corley is on the horizon to give me some reps soon. Again, this is my 20-man big time NFL Sim Dynasty League with IDPs. I need a better performance out of Jermaine Johnson as well. That's for sure. Because I also have him as one of my IDPs here. But yeah, I need to see some Corley ball. Otherwise, I'm going to start to get really concerned with the future of my team.
Peter S says, please play the rookies this week. So that's another one too. Braylon Allen did not get any rushes until the final drive when they pulled Aaron Rodgers and put Tyrod Taylor in, which I also don't think helped Breece Hall. When Breece wasn't able to get going, I don't know why you don't, shake it up and put Allen in there for a couple carries. And it's something that they do a lot. Rico says it right under it. The Jets love starting their rookie slow to a fault, in my opinion. They even eased in Garrett Wilson and Breece Hall, which is true. But if you're going to roster Braylon Allen as your second running back, you have to use him. You can't not use your second running back because he's a rookie and you don't trust him. Like, where was he on that 3rd and 1 and 4th and 1 possession that the Jets weren't able to convert? Like, why wasn't he getting short yardage touches? It doesn't make any sense.
I have to be totally honest with you. There are a lot of things that happened in week 1 where throughout the offseason, when I kept mentioning my question marks with this team and how they relate to some of the personnel decisions that Robert Saleh makes, those questions only got more amplified in week 1 because of decisions like this. Like, you do have young, talented players. I mean, not that the Giants are any sort of gold standard for NFL success, but they played pretty much all of their rookies in week 1. Their best performers in week 1 ended up being their rookies. Sometimes it happens. Sometimes rookies go out there and they do exceed your expectations and play well, but that's not going to happen. And those players aren't going to develop unless you give them some playing time. So I'm actually with Peter here. I think that we need to see the rookies play more. I think that the Jets have some potentially impactful rookies on their roster. And why roster them if you're not going to play them? I do think it's due time for some playing time to be handed out to some of these young guys.
Harlan says Reddick in his last 5 games last year had no sacks. Jets should not give in. They paid big money based on past performance before. Those players did not perform for the Jets. Well, unfortunately, they made their bed when they let Bryce Huff walk out the window and trade away John Franklin Myers. Like, this was their plan to get Hassan Reddick in here and to play for them. And I'm not asking the Jets to give him a 3-year contract to where it's going into 2026. But to me, I don't think there's any reason that you can't redo the number for this year. They moved money around. They have $18 million in cap space currently right now for a player like Hassan Reddick. You could structure it so where there's, signing bonus money and it's, not all the money is against the cap. Redo it for this year. If you have to tack something on for 2025, that's fine. But again, like, it shouldn't be this complicated. I feel like both sides are just being so ridiculously stubborn on this situation.
I totally agree. I think in life, communication is key. Sometimes you just need to have some open and honest conversations and come to a compromise. Unfortunately, the Jets and Hassan Reddick have been unable to do so, but I do have a feeling that Hassan Reddick is playing this the right way. The more that the season goes on, the more that they feel his absence, the more likely they are to cave and hand him what he's seeking, which I don't know if is in the best interest of this team. I think I've been pretty clear that I wouldn't pay him long term and I would find another solution if I were the Jets. I just don't know if there is another solution. And I think with a team that has Super Bowl aspirations and wants to make a deep playoff run, if this continues to go on throughout the year and they really feel this absence, they might not have a choice but to pay him and see if that course corrects the defense for the season and gives them their hopes back for making that deep playoff run. So I think the Jets are in a really tricky situation here, and they've kind of painted themselves into a corner.
Oh, okay. So we got a big Jeremy. We're on the topic. We got a big Jeremy Fowler tweet that I got to pull up here, which is not making me feel very good. But he says, from our week 2 buzz file, multiple league execs believe the Jets will eventually need to explore flipping Hassan Reddick via trade, as the contract impasse has no end in sight. Not sure they have a choice. God damn it. What the hell? This is ridiculous. It really is, man. I can't believe that it got to this point. But it's going to get spin zone into Joe Douglas can do no wrong. He'll flip him and somehow get Davante Adams, and we'll ignore that the Jets don't have a pass rusher, and then just blame everything on Robert Saleh and not, hold Joe Douglas to any standard whatsoever.
That's exactly what I was about to ask you. If this ends up turning into Hassan Reddick flipped for Davante Adams, do we feel more positively, or there's a pretty negative undertone to what you were kind of describing there. So,
I mean, I would be very happy with Davante Adams on this team, and I think he improves the wide receiver room, and they need to improve the wide receiver room. But like, this team is built around their defense and their really good pass rush, and they let their younger 10-sack edge rusher walk in free agency, and then again traded away your best run defending edge for reasons for a 2026 6th-round pick, and now you're playing Michael Clemens and Will McDonald 50% of the snaps. Like, I don't see the plan here.
I'm not sure that I see it either. I have had my question marks with this team. I have my confidence in this team, though, as well. I do think they bounce back this week against Tennessee. This is a very, very winnable game. But at the same time, if we are on Monday talking about 2 losses once again for New York, it might get ugly.
Yeah. Well, so with that, let's close the show by giving our score predictions in this game. What are we thinking here for the Jets?
I'm going 30-10. I think they put up a lot of points. I think that they dominate this one. Maybe I'm in the minority on how much I dislike this Titans team, how low I am on this Titans team. I think this is one of the worst rosters in football. I do not think they are a good football team. I think that they absolutely get trampled by a Jets team that needs to get right and bounce back in week 2. I think they do exactly that. I think Rodgers has some really key moments. Breece Hall has his bounce back, and the defense looks more like the defense that we were expecting it to be entering week 1. So going 30-10, New York Jets 1-1 on the year.
I'm going to go 27-17 Jets win. I think the defense holds their opponent under 20 points. I am a little bit worried about the ground game, so I think Pollard gets in the end zone. I think the Jets, tack on some extra points in this one, get up to 27, almost 30 points. That's crazy. And lost in the Jets loss to San Francisco, they scored 3 offensive touchdowns. That was a new feeling for me. I enjoyed that quite a bit, even if one was in garbage time. I'm going to count it. Still counts on the stat sheet. So I'll go 27-17. Jets back in the win column. Peter S is saying 27-13. So kind of splitting the difference between you and I. So I like it. Jets need to win this game, get back to 1-1. And hopefully we're having a more positive episode on Monday. That'd be nice.
I think at least one of us will be.
That'll do it for us on this episode, guys. Thank you so much for tuning in. Leave a like before you go. Subscribe to the channel if you're new. Anthony, catch him over on Fireside Giants. Me, Matt O'Leary, NY, and Talking Jets. We'll catch you next time.